So when my first child was born, we did take her to the eye doctor shortly after she was born. She had some testing done. So she's 13 now. She has perfect vision. So we are definitely very blessed for that. But we have always followed up very closely with the eye doctor. She goes every single year. And she actually saw the same eye doctor I saw because, again, when she was born, I was only 20 and I had not found like a big girl eye doctor yet. So I was still seeing the
pediatric one.
Yeah.
At 20 years old.
Yes.
Just going in there pregnant as hell.
Exactly.
All the little kids in the waiting area.
For your unborn baby. No, I'm here for me.
Yeah.
And then I would like bring the both of us and I would just like have her on my lap and like check us both out until she was like, okay, you really need to like, come on.
That is
this is
too
ridiculous.
Go find a new doctor.
Hello, everyone. We are back with another episode of Babies Down, Bottles Up. All of the girls are here today, and we are going on to part 2 from last week, where we are going to be just talking about having children and being concerned about passing on any kind of hereditary eye conditions. But how are y'all, ladies? Are you ready to get into it?
Hey, yes.
Yeah.
We're warmed up now, so
I hope that everybody enjoyed the interviews. We had a really good time and we really enjoyed having the different perspectives about what people have done and the choices that they've made for their lives. And we are excited to share the thoughts that we have personally. Let's go ahead, Josselyn. Let's start with you. What were your thoughts when you were younger and then once you and Jamel got together about having children?
yeah. So I actually didn't want kids. I never, sat around and thought, oh my God, I'm going to get married one day and I'm going to have kids. Like, I just thought that I, was going to be independent and I was going to live this like Sex in the City life, where and I just never wanted kids. I also never grew up around, I was the baby of the family, so I didn't have other babies to love on. And so maybe that's why I just didn't ever feel moved by kids, or the desire to have any of my own. But I remember having conversations with boyfriends about eye conditions and whether that would change my decision on having kids. And I think before having kids, I was like, yeah, I wouldn't want my condition to be passed on, but it wasn't this wall for me that I was like either or, you know what I mean? I'm not gonna not have kids because of it. It was just a concern, but it didn't sway my decision either way. And with Jamel, we didn't have a chance to talk about it before I got knocked up,
We heard that story.
Yeah. So, but we did talk about it while I was pregnant because I think we did consider genetic testing. And we just came to the conclusion that what was it going to change really? I wasn't going to make any different decision. We weren't going to prepare any differently. And so it just wasn't really going to it wasn't going to change anything. So why, so that was kind of my thoughts before having children. And then once we did have Ari, she went in for an eye exam, I think as early as 3 months. And she does have progressive myopia, which just means she's nearsighted. So she wears glasses and we check her every 6 months for glaucoma because we both have glaucoma. So far so good, and she's 7 and her vision's pretty stable. Her doctor says that she'll be able to drive under conditions when she gets older. So hopefully, everything does stay the same. And it's the same with Avani. I actually had her appointment set before she was even born. I think she was maybe 3 weeks old when we took her in for her first appointment. And she also has progressive myopia, but same thing, like everything is stable and no signs of glaucoma. So that's really great. But yeah, that's kind of how I felt about having kids. It wasn't scary for me. The scary part is just every time you go to the doctor and like, is it going to be something different? You know what I mean? Like just kind of that anxiety of, are we still in the clear, but I think that's always going to be there, always that fear of once we get glaucoma, like that's the scary part.
Right.
So yeah.
What did your friends and family think? Did you have like any pushback about having children, or was that a factor at all?
Yeah, of course. My family, were like up in arms about it all. They just didn't understand how I was ever going to take care of a child. And then I was having a child with another blind person. And it was just like, they're just, I remember.
Scandalous.
It was awful. They just knew I wasn't going to be able to do it. And, different factors too, like we've mentioned before, we were broke college students. We were in a place in life to be having children. So it was just a combination of things, but vision was definitely one of them. I just remember my mom more than anybody, just, not having the confidence, but also it's just because she didn't know, she had never seen blind people parent before. So it's the ignorance of it all and all of that. But with my second child, I actually got into a pretty heated argument with one of my best friends. Like, this is a friend, we've been friends since we were teenagers. And I had called her nobody knew that I was pregnant at this point. This was my second pregnancy. And I had called her to, kind of tell her like, hey, it's nobody really knows yet, but I'm pregnant. And she just started telling me how she thought it was irresponsible for me to keep having kids because she felt like we weren't economically ready. But not just that, she just felt like we already had a child with a visual impairment. And she thought it was irresponsible for me to keep having kids, knowing that that was a possibility. And it felt like a punch in the gut. And I just couldn't believe that, she really felt that way about it. And I remember asking her, like, because she's visually impaired as well. So I remember asking her, so do you think that you have a bad quality of life because of your vision? And she straight up was like, yeah, I do. And I think it was then that I realized that was her, like, this was her opinion based on her experiences and how she perceived her own life. Because I honestly think that my quality of life is better because I'm blind, because I don't make snap judgments on people and things like that. And yeah, it's difficult for the obvious reasons, right? But the things that make blindness difficult is not that you're blind. It's a lot of it that we live in a world that's not structured. It's not made for people with disabilities in mind. That's really what it is. Blindness in itself is not the problem. It's the problem that we live in a society that's not built around our disabilities.
Yeah, I think that's very well said.
Yeah, and that's in infrastructure, that's in just society norms, that's in people's, perceptions.
Like we talk about all the time.
It comes back to this, but it does. And so anyways, we got off that call and I just remember being so heartbroken, and I didn't talk to her. Well, I went on to miscarry that pregnancy. But for the next 6 months, I wasn't picking up her calls. It wasn't even that I didn't want to talk to her. It was just like, I really didn't know how our
like, where do you go
friendship
from
could
there?
move from there. Right. Because I felt like at this point, you're judging my life decisions. And how can I bring you around my family when you feel like me having kids is irresponsible? You know, like I just felt like every time she would come and interact with my kids, I would feel like it was fake because she didn't approve of me having them in the first place. And so I had all these thoughts, you know, and it took me so long. And then she came in town and wanted to go to dinner, and we went to dinner. And like when I saw her, I just realized how much I missed her, you know, and like we sat down and I straight up told her, like, this is how that conversation made me feel. And honestly, like, I don't know where to go from here. And she told me her side, and she was like, I have felt horrible about that conversation since we hung up the phone. And she just apologized, and she said, I just, you know, want you to know that I don't, you know, it is your life to live. And I've realized that now, and my opinion shouldn't have, I shouldn't even have told you my opinion because it doesn't make a difference. And like, I love your kids regardless, and it is your life to live. And, you know, we had this whole conversation. But the point is, we did move past it, but it was really hard at the time to just like figure out how to move from that, you know, as a friend. So,
Right.
yeah.
And there's such a fine line too, like with friends, with being supportive versus being truthful too.
Yeah.
And sometimes we end up falling on the wrong side of that line.
Yeah. Because some of what she was saying, she was right. Like, we definitely were not in the right economic state to be having kids. Like, we weren't. And I give her that. And, you know, but the whole vision situation, I think that was more of her projecting kind of how she felt about her own disability and her own decisions onto me. So,
right.
But I had to realize that, and she had to realize that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. Is there anything else you want to add? No, that's a lot.
No.
That's heavy.
Yeah, I think that's it. But we're good now. She's in town. I'm gonna have girls' night with her next week.
Hey,
she loves
good.
my kids. Like, she's auntie, you know what I mean? But it's just a learning. And I think we have to give grace to those people that we love too, because they just don't know sometimes, you know, as far as like family, sometimes they just don't know, or like friends. And I think it all really just comes from a place of love at the end of the day. And so, but we both have to figure out how to move past it and apologize when it's necessary.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Karina, would you like to share next about your experience having children and how the decision to have children, how that went for you?
Yeah, so I think for me, I was listening to Josselyn kind of speak her thoughts, and a lot of my thoughts kind of aligned with hers as far as, you know, when I was growing up, I didn't really think I wanted kids, and I think a lot of my decision was based on the fact that I didn't want them to be blind. And you know, at that point in time, I didn't really know if my condition was genetic or not. And I'm also a glaucoma baby. I was born with congenital glaucoma. I had some vision growing up, and then suddenly lost it as a teenager. So it was a very traumatic just experience for me overall, with all the surgeries and all the doctor's visits and everything that I went through as a child, and seeing all the fears and things that my mom was dealing with herself, and doing all of it as a single mother, and you know, trying to take care of me and all my needs as well as my siblings. I didn't want that for myself, truthfully. I was terrified. I had no idea, you know, if I had the desire or the strength at that to be able to handle something like this if I was put in that situation. So yeah, early on I did decide I don't want kids. And you know, nobody in my family is blind or has this condition. So, and coming from this Hispanic background in this culture that often doesn't go to the doctor when they need to, you know, and they don't necessarily know like their history and like what's going on with them. Like I had no idea what was going on with me. So it's not until, I became an adult and kind of really surrounded myself more with the blindness community and researched more of my own condition and how many people truly experience this themselves, like that I realized like, okay, it's more common than I thought, and like people still have fulfilling lives, and it's okay, that I really came around and started to like wonder what it would be like to be a parent. And like Josselyn said, like when I became pregnant and like actually was put in that position, I really didn't have my mind made up at that point. I was still like, I don't know, like, yeah, mixed feelings basically. And so once I was pregnant is when I started to really worry and like just wonder, like, okay, now that I'm here, I know that I want this baby. And that was kind of like my ultimate decision. Like I knew regardless of what it was to come or like what was in the cards for my child, like I wanted my baby, and like I was going to face whatever had to happen. So at that point, my partner and I kind of like we knew. So my partner is Martin, and he has also hereditary cataracts, and then I have glaucoma. So both of our conditions, could be passed on to our kids, but we didn't know that going into it. So, there was a lot of, I think, fear on my end, not necessarily for him. I think he was less worried about it than me, but I think just I'm just like I worry about everything in general. So it was just that like I need to prepare for this. Like I'm a Virgo. I mean, we've talked about this. We need to be in control of the situation and just like be prepared and like know what's going to happen before it comes, right? That's just the attitude. And so I was very nervous. I was very anxious, and like I started talking to genetic counselors, and I started really like wondering what the possibilities were, and really just doing more research on myself and like where did this come from, because nobody in my family has this. So it wasn't really I'm trying to remember like how it all went down exactly, but I think my son was born and then we went and did genetic testing. He was born with neither of our conditions, which was awesome. I feel like we're pretty lucky.
Yeah.
Because, later on we found out like my condition is definitely a 50-50.
Wow.
So
he is lucky.
Yeah.
Lucky little boy.
I'm so I mean I can't tell you how relieved I was. And like that's not to say that like if he was blind or if he had anything, like I absolutely would have been okay with it, And yeah, I always said that like
you had him knowing it was a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And like was I afraid and just absolutely scared for whatever it was like that would happen? Like I totally was, and like I prayed about it, and I just it's emotional for me even talking about it, because like it was definitely a fear for me, and like just all around not knowing, like just mostly like not wanting my child to suffer the way that I felt like I suffered.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it's a completely different thing to be like, I'm okay if my child has this disability, but then when you actually go into the doctor and like they say it out loud sometimes, like it's okay to also grieve that, to also grieve the fact that like you were holding on to that possibility that it wouldn't have happened.
And we don't want our kids to struggle, and we know that if they are affected by blindness, they are going to have certain struggles. That doesn't mean their life isn't worth living. That doesn't mean they don't have a good quality of life, but there will be struggles there, and nobody wants their kids to struggle.
Yeah. And I think that was the biggest part of it for me. I mean, like we've said many times already, like blind child's best role model is a blind parent, and I truly believe that. But again, does that mean that I was fully prepared for that? No, not at all. And so, like, when my son was born, we immediately, had the doctor, pediatric ophthalmologist, check him out. I mean, within weeks, of his birth, we were taking him in. We were having them like just check everything, because we were like, we want to be prepared. The earlier the better. Like, we want to make sure that he's receiving all the resources that he needs, if there is something. So
yeah,
we were
what
very
about your
proactive. Daughter? So yeah, when my daughter was born, it was, kind of the same process, because I had that same anxiety, I was like, well, let me be, I got 50-50 on this one. Like,
so you knew going in, you were like,
I was like, oh shit, let me be the unlucky.
Yeah. Well, the odds had been in your favor prior to that.
Exactly. And so it's all the same feelings all over, when we found out that she was coming, it was all the same things. But I feel like mentally I was more prepared for it, you know what I mean? Because like I had already gone through all the same emotions and prepared for it, and like I knew what to expect in that regard, as far as going to the doctor and getting the appointments all lined up, and like having them in labor and delivery, like keep an eye out and like do all that. Yeah. So thankfully she is fine too.
Dang. So are y'all gonna keep
no, we're
testing your luck?
No, we're done. I told Martin that too. I'm like, watch us if we decided to have a third. Like, this would be the one. This would be
it.
Yeah. No, but I don't know. Like, it was definitely a huge sigh of relief for me, because I just didn't want them to suffer and go through all the things that I went through all the trauma, because it really is a lot of trauma.
It's a lot going into it, yeah, for sure. And it sticks with you,
Yeah.
You don't forget it. And it's in it does affect every aspect of their life.
It really does.
So it's a lot to consider, but when you've gone through it yourself, you know what to expect. You get them ready. If you do happen to have a visually impaired child, you can get them ready for what's to come.
Yeah, and now now that they're well, I mean, we still follow up with pediatric ophthalmology every 6 months, sometimes a year, just depends. When they're so little, oftentimes they want to see them more often, just to catch anything sooner.
Yes.
But we're very proactive with that, and we make sure we take them in and have them look, checked out. And like every time, like you were saying, it's like you're holding your breath, because you just you don't want something to come up, because it's like you've made it this far. Like, can we just
can we just
keep it going? Because it's very anxiety inducing for me every time I go in, because I don't want them to find something like, that just popped up out of nowhere. I think with Martin, his were they juvenile cataracts, so it's something that could pop up until later, the later age, where mine was like congenital, so it was at birth.
Right.
So yeah, it's still anxiety.
We definitely hold our breath. Yeah.
What about your friends and family? What did they have to say? Did you get, again, like any pushback about having children, especially with someone else who is blind?
Let me tell you. So I had pushback from my family. Well, primarily from my mom, I should say. Not necessarily because of the blindness, but because I wasn't married. So
that's a whole other thing.
It was a whole other
episode.
Episode. And again, I mean, my mother, bless her heart, she's, old school Hispanic Mexican lady that believes you should be
A
married.
señora, and
Yeah,
she just
señora.
wants the right for you, and she wants you to follow the traditions.
Yeah, very traditional.
Yes.
So she, when I said, so Mom, I'm pregnant, and her response was literally, and I'll say it in Spanish because we need to, pues ya que. That was her response, and to translate, that means,
well, fuck, what now?
Well, fuck, what now? Yeah. That was her response, and I never let her live it down because I'm like, Mom, you couldn't just be a normal person.
What kind of response is that?
And say fucking congratulations or something. No. Well, now what? That was her response, legitimately. And I thought it would change the second time around. No, it was the same response.
Oh no!
And again,
we've been through this before.
And you're still not married. What happened?
What are you gonna do?
Oh, she said, "What happened?"
Yeah, when are you gonna get married? Like that's that's her biggest concern, I think. But the blindness thing, never really came up. I always wondered though, like if they had any thoughts, they just didn't voice them. You know what I mean? Like I feel like
that's a lot nicer than my family. They came to me with all the thoughts.
No,
had all the thoughts.
I really wish they would have, because it would have been kind of interesting to see, their feelings and perspectives on the whole situation. But no, like they were just more so like, when are you getting married? And like I had subtle like hints here and there about like, how are you taking care of your kids? Like what do you who
like
helps
you knew that it was there, they just didn't want to ask it.
Because they know I would say something. Like my mom knows, like I always have a response for something. Like when she came, I used to take care of like a friend's kid, and she was like, oh, I bet she was such a good helper to you. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. So like I shut that down real quick. And like I obviously didn't want her to have that same, attitude / expectations for my kids, and like how they're supposed to take care of me, and all that whole situation. So
yes,
you definitely know they're thinking it, but they're just not voicing it. So
honestly, that's probably the best way it can be.
Like, keep your mouth shut.
Yes. If you have nothing nice to say.
Yeah.
Well, Keisha, it's your time to shine, baby.
I know you've been so quiet today.
I am tired. Okay. Honestly, I didn't really worry about the blindness aspect of it. So I was born with congenital glaucoma. So I've had it since birth. And Axel had bilateral retinoblastoma. And he was diagnosed at 2.5 years old. And so, honestly, I don't really know if he was concerned, but I was kind of in the mindset of, well, I'm blind and I've lived through it. And I don't know what it's like to have a kid with blindness, but I think I can manage, or we can manage. And so, when I found out that I was pregnant with Zane, we talked about it. Not really like in depth that I can remember. When we talked about it, and we went and did genetic testing while I was pregnant, and we both found out that it was a 50-50 chance with both of us. So he could either it's a 50% chance that he could have retinoblastoma, and then it's also a 50% chance that he could have congenital glaucoma. And so, I mean, of course, you don't want your kid to have blindness or anything like that, especially not cancer. But it didn't really affect how we felt about the pregnancy. And so we had Zane, and in April, so he was about 4 months old, we took him to get genetic testing. And that was the hardest thing that I feel like I ever had to do for the first hardest thing that I had to do as a mom was to hold him while they stuck like a needle in his arm. That was really hard for me, but I knew that it needed to be done so that we could have just some peace of mind. And luckily, he didn't carry any of the genes. So he was cleared for retinoblastoma. I'm not sure, or we don't know if he was cleared for glaucoma, because Axel would have had to go do more genetic testing to find out if he had the gene for glaucoma. And genetic testing was pretty interesting because it explained to me how I got congenital glaucoma. So my mom, I'm going to give you guys a science lesson.
Get out your Punnett squares.
Yeah.
Your Punnett squares.
So my mom and my dad both had a mutated gene. It came together and voila, I have glaucoma. And so they said that 1 out of 3 of my mom's kids would have glaucoma. So my mom has 3 girls. And I'm the second
and
one.
it was
You're the lucky one.
You're the lucky one.
Yes.
They weren't wrong. Shit.
Right. They weren't wrong. And so I was like, oh, fuck. And so, I mean, we had kids, and Zane, he was, his vision's fine. He did start going to the ophthalmologist he was about 1 month old. And that was hard for me because, I mean, shit, I didn't know anything about it. Axel was at work. Luckily, my mom was still in town. It was like her last day in town visiting from when Zane was born. And I took her with me because I'm like, if anybody knows about this eye shit,
Yes.
it's you.
Yeah, that's so true.
It is.
So she came with me and she helped me. Unfortunately, we kind of had to hold him down to just have them look in the back of his eye.
Oh.
So yeah, she wasn't there for the birth, but she was there for that, which I think is really important because I don't know if I could have done it on my own. So, so he was fine. And then they wanted us to come back in 2 months. And I think I went there on my own because I think Axel had to work again. It was like a brand new job. He already missed days because of Zane being born. And it was like it was just not possible for him to miss. But he was on the phone the entire time and everything went well. But they did recommend that we come back to, basically just to keep an eye on it. And so we did the genetic testing in April, and then here comes July and I'm pregnant again.
We have no idea how that happened.
Right. I have no idea.
I just ended up like this.
I woke up like this.
Yeah. And so one thing I really like so Zane was born in Baltimore and I had Kaiser at the time. And I absolutely love Kaiser because they had a lot of resources for us with genetic testing. We got to meet with a genetic counselor. And so when Zanaya
it's all internal, which is
yes,
nice. They have all the doctors there. Like,
yes,
it's super easy to line everything up.
It is. And it's like sometimes in the same building.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I was on Kaiser growing up. And so I just loved Kaiser. I don't know. And so when I moved to Texas and I found out that Kaiser wasn't a thing here, I was kind of sad and like, oh, geez. But so we moved to Texas in November of that year, and we weren't able to do genetic testing for Zanaya. I wasn't working. I didn't have insurance. I mean, I had like the pregnancy Medicaid. They weren't offering genetic testing. So they don't do that, unfortunately. And so
genetic testing is expensive.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah.
It's expensive.
It really is.
Luckily we didn't have to pay for anything with Kaiser, but that just wasn't an option with Zanaya. We had her and everything looked fine. That was always one of our concerns. Just like we always asked, like, how are their eyes looking every time each of them were born? And they passed the basic eye exam, like in the hospital and at the doctor's office. And so, I mean, we were good. And I honestly feel like, so then I didn't get a chance to go to the eye doctor until she was 4 months old because I didn't know that there were so many people who have blind kids in Texas. So it's a waiting list. And so
y'all are hogging all the appointments.
Yeah, because I believe we did her appointment before she was born. It may have been March or maybe she was like a week old, but we couldn't take her till July. And we took Zane too because he hadn't had a checkup since the year before. and everything went well. And so they were just like, all right, come back in a year. And we were like, cool. So we've been going back every year. The only thing that that they've noticed with Zanaya is that she has astigmatism. So they said that she may have to have glasses when she gets older, but we wouldn't be able to tell until she started school. And so far, they haven't said anything about her vision. I mean, I don't know how much they're using their eyes in pre-K, but
Yeah.
so far so good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a blessing, especially because we both had that 50% chance.
Right.
Yeah, that's a
Isn't it-
big chance.
I mean, it's that
you guys are
it's
lucky.
rolling
Yeah.
the dice. I mean, it really is.
It really is.
Like, oh my God.
But I do feel like if we were to have another kid, that
You're
third
like
one would
me.
be fucked.
Yeah, you're like me. Yeah.
Double whammy.
Yeah. So
What about your friends and family? What did they have to say? Any issues as far as that goes?
no, actually, my mom, she was excited. I was her last kid to have a baby, and I was terrified to tell her. And she was like, why would I be mad? You're like 29, you have a college degree, you have a job. Like, that's none of my business. And so I was like, cool. So everybody was really excited. And I have a bunch of sisters. So I have three sisters. Shit. How many sisters do I have?
She's like 1, 2, buckle my shoe. I don't know.
I have 4 sisters. So I have 2 with my on my mom's side, and then my bio dad has 2. And there's no boys. And so they were excited because Zane's a boy and he's the first boy on our side of the family. And I knew it could go either way because Axel has all brothers. So I was like, okay, she's like, we're half and half here. Yeah. So they were excited about that. But
listen, parents, take notes. This is the response you should give people, not the response that I got.
I was very thankful for that. But now the second one, when she found out that I was having another kid and Zane was only 7 months old, she was not too happy about that. But it was not because of my blindness, because she knew that I could do it. Because I mean, Zane was
you were already doing it.
Yeah,
we were already doing it. It was just the fact that she knew that they're 15 months apart. It's going to be the logistics super hard. Being blind and having things to look, and it was hard. Like, it was hard having 2 kids in diapers and car seats. Like, I remember the first time we took them out to eat, and we probably shouldn't have taken them out to eat, but we took them out with Richie. We went out to eat, and it was like so stressful. And like we went to a restaurant, and I couldn't hear Zanaya crying, and it was loud, and I had to change her diaper in the booth, and it was some shit. They spilled some water.
It was ghetto.
Yeah.
It's like a circus act trying to do all of the things with the 2 kids. I feel it, man.
Yeah.
Some days.
So I do not recommend having your kids that close together. I mean, it wasn't planned, but I mean, we made it through. But yeah, it wasn't because of our blindness, which I'm very thankful for, because I'm not the outspoken type. I do not like confrontation. It makes me uncomfortable, which is probably not a good thing because I'm a therapist and like we have to go through confrontation sometimes with our clients, but it makes me really uncomfortable, and I probably wouldn't have said anything if there was like some backlash. But I mean, like we said before, mind your own uterus, and then we wouldn't have these problems.
Right.
What about you, Terrin? What were your thoughts before having kids on all of this?
Well, I think I have a little bit of a different perspective because I had 20/20 vision until I was like 10 years old. And we didn't know that I had any kind of eye condition. So I went all of those years not knowing anything was different. So I had always known, even during those years, that I wanted to be a mother at some point. I have macular degeneration. We're not really even certain what I have. I had gone from the time I was about 10 years old until Scarlett was maybe 2 or 3. So what was that? I don't know, 13 years or so, thinking that I had Stargardt's. So that was kind of my impression. And what I was told is like Keisha said, my mom carried this mutated gene. My dad carried the mutated gene, and bam, I got it. And I have two other siblings from same mom, same dad. Both of them are sighted. So I was the lucky one.
Dang.
But to cut to later on down the road, we did genetic testing, and I don't have Stargardt, so I don't really know exactly what I have. It is macular degeneration of some sort.
Oh,
But in my younger years, like when I was a teenager, I was the oldest of four. So I babysat all of the kids. So it would really be super hypocritical of my parents to say, oh, I don't know that you should have kids when I like watched their kids for so many years. So
How dare
I
you?
didn't really get that. However, my first child was born when I was 20 and I was pregnant with her when I was 19. So it was the age and I was a single mother. But really, I always knew I would have children. And when I lost my vision, that really didn't change. I did assume that whatever I had was likely genetic. But it just really was not something I really thought about that much. So when my first child was born, we did take her to the eye doctor shortly after she was born. She had some testing done. But I mean, it's so hard because I had 20/20 vision until I was older. So it was kind of like a waiting game, especially because this kiddo was 13. They weren't really pushing genetic testing so much back then. It was more of a newer science, and it was more so reserved for more like critical medical diagnoses. So genetic testing was never offered for her. So she's 13 now. She has perfect vision. So we are definitely very blessed for that. But we have always followed up very closely with the eye doctor. She goes every single year. And she actually saw the same eye doctor I saw because, again, when she was born, I was only 20 and I had not found like a big girl eye doctor yet. So I was still seeing a
pediatric one.
Yeah.
At 20 years old.
Yes.
Just going in there pregnant as hell.
Exactly.
All the little kids in the waiting area.
For your unborn baby. No, I'm here for me.
Yeah.
And then I would like bring the both of us and I would just like have her on my lap and like check us both out until she was like, okay, you really need to like, come on.
That is too
ridiculous.
Go find a new doctor.
I mean, it's nice.
You're
it's
an
nice
adult
though.
now. When did she cut you off?
Yeah.
I think I was like 23 and she was like, this is enough.
Get your big ass out of my chair. I'm not giving you a
Chair doesn't even
lollipop.
fit. Like you don't even fit in the chair.
No.
Oh my
So
God.
that's how things were with her. And then my second child, she was born 9 weeks premature. So we also were concerned about my blindness, but also retinopathy of prematurity because of her exposure to oxygen when she was born and when she was in the NICU. So she went, I think she was only maybe like 3 days past being discharged from the NICU. So she had only been to her pediatrician and the eye doctor. And I do have to say she had an asplosion in the eye doctor.
She remembers this video. You never forget those.
Yeah. Oh
Because
no.
they have like that really short carpeting in the eye doctors. So like she shat like explosive and it was like on me and then it was on the floor everywhere. And I was trying to like scrub it all out. And I was like, this is fucked up. This is ghetto as hell. And she wasn't even 5 pounds yet. I think she was discharged from the NICU and she was 4 pounds, 9 ounces.
Oh, yo, little
so she
babies.
was so little.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Wow.
They have the biggest poops when you.
Yes.
I don't know how all that.
I don't know how they did it.
Yeah.
I don't remember that. I did
How
not
does all that come out of such a little body?
miss that. Ugh.
Right.
Yeah. I
and then
never
the range
understood
on
it.
that thing. I'm like, damn.
Oh yeah.
It went some distance.
Yes. So thankfully for my second child, she did not have ROP, thankfully, but she started developing some other medical conditions that were quite concerning. I won't go into it all, but she spent about the first probably 3 years of her life, most of that in the hospital. And up until about a year ago, we had a whole team of nurses pretty much around the clock helping us to care for her. So during that time, we were really trying to figure out really what was going on with her health condition. She did not have a diagnosis until she was 3 years old. And that was really difficult because we just knew she was just so fucking sick and we could not figure out what the problem was. So we were referred to first a genetic counselor. And I don't know if this is a Louisiana thing or if this is just an everywhere thing, but my husband and I are in there and we're like giving our medical histories and they're asking us, can the Barkers and the Landrys potentially be related in any way? Like, are your family trees like shared in any type of way? Yes. I'm like, is that
like
a Louisiana
it's Corey, your
thing?
cousin?
Yes, that 100%.
I'm interested
That's what
now.
he
I
was
wonder
asking.
if they asked that. I mean, that's weird.
That is so bizarre.
It was very awkward. We are not related. We had genetic testing, so we really know we're not related. But, all of that to say, we were then referred to a metabolic geneticist. And baby, let me tell you, that is quite the specialty. There are not a lot of them, and they have very long wait lists. And I didn't even know that was the thing.
Metabolic
geneticist. Yes, because they knew that she had some kind of metabolic disorder. We just didn't know what. So we bring her in to see this doctor, and he's doing some wild shit. He's like taking pictures of her face. He's measuring the features of her face, and he's like, yep, she has a syndrome.
Oh,
I was like,
wow.
excuse me, what?
That's wild.
He's like, you see how her ears, how they line up to her eyebrows? It's not quite right. That's indicative of a syndrome. And I'm like, what the fuck? This is crazy. So there are, without getting too technical, there's a bunch of different kinds of genetic testing that can be done. So her original genetic testing was called like a microarray. And that's essentially, if you have a book, you're looking to make sure every page of the book is present. That's a microarray. So that came back just showing that she had something called short chain acetylcholine dehydrogenase deficiency, which a long way to say.
How many times did you have to practice saying that before you could like
said
get
it over and over again to the doctor because I was like, I cannot be out here looking like an idiot. Tell me if I'm saying this right.
Like,
but
how
also,
do you spell that? Yeah.
Right?
Sounds right.
He had a very strong Indian accent.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Who's saying this correctly? But they knew that condition was not something that would cause all of her symptoms. So they did another form of genetic testing called exome sequencing. And that is like taking a book and making sure every letter of every line of every word of every page is correct. And that's when we found out that she had a mitochondrial disease, a very rare mitochondrial disease. So that can also cause vision issues because your mitochondria create the energy for your cells and it affects every organ system of your body. So she does have some vision issues unrelated to whatever I have going on. So she has visual processing disorder, which is really caused from weak muscles in her eyes. So she does wear glasses to help with the strengthening of those muscles, and we do vision therapy, which is really helpful. But so far, she's not shown like any symptoms of what I have. So she's only 10 years old. So we're kind of like at that area that if something is going to start showing up, it would be pretty soon. But I think we kind of have a unique perspective because, we talk a lot about, or we have in these last couple of episodes about knowing that your child could experience blindness. Would you still have children? And my answer is yes. Clearly, it is yes. That it was really a non-factor for me. However, our other child's metabolic disorder, as part of that exome sequencing, my husband and I did also have genetic testing. And we did find out it was a fluke mutation that happened at conception. My husband and I do not carry the mutated genes to be able to pass that on to other children. However, if we we would not have other children. And that's my decision. If you don't like it, tell your mom. I don't care, because
Judge
this
your
is my
mama.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah, judge your mom, because this is my life and my family, and this is what's right for us. I don't feel like my blindness really affects my quality of life, but for my younger child, her medical conditions very much do. I'm so thankful she has outlived her life expectancy by far, but there are only 26 living people with this mutation.
Wow.
So it's very rare, but also it's life limiting. And knowing now that very few people with this form of mitochondrial disease live on their own, and just the medical part of things, I would not willingly pass that along to another child, because I really do feel like it affects her quality of life in a lot of ways. So I think I just wanted to add that perspective, because I feel like I have a very good quality of life. My blindness really doesn't affect me too much, other than when I drop something on the ground, or the fact that I can't
That's
drive.
the worst.
Yeah.
Both of those. Shit.
But I did want to just also add that, I'm not all in one camp, that I'm not saying like, no matter what kind of a genetic condition that you carry, that just means you should have children. Like, regardless, it does not matter. I'm not in that camp. I actually disagree with that. So I just wanted to add that perspective, in the way that not all conditions, in my opinion, would I choose to pass on. So that was a lot of science. So
so with all that, Terrin, did you guys have any pushback from your family or families, as far as having other kids?
We did. And I think that was not anything to do with blindness. Actually, it was my first child. I was so young and I didn't have a partner, so it was reasonable that people would have thoughts, for sure. And then my second child, my husband and we hadn't been together very long, and he wasn't making a ton of money, so people had opinions just about, he's not going to stay around, or he ain't shit, or, whatever. The thoughts that people had about him. He's definitely proven that wrong. But I do have to say, now we are actively trying to grow our family. And there are lots of thoughts even still now, not so much about passing blindness on to a child, but whether it's responsible enough for us to add to our family, even though we don't have to worry about passing on the mitochondrial disease that Scarlett has, but just like, can we handle more children? Like, is it even responsible? Are we too old? Like, there are
too
lots
old.
of thoughts. Yes, I know.
Oh my goodness.
So there are lots of thoughts. So it just goes back to mind your own uterus.
Yeah.
If you're not feeding me, fucking me, or financing me, you don't get an opinion. You don't get a vote.
Amen.
So these children we care for on our own. My husband's in the military. We care for these kiddos on our own. And if we choose to grow our family, that's our business. And that's just kind of our thought about it.
You know what's crazy? So like recently I went on Facebook and I was like, I have some exciting news to share, right? Why?
Oh my God, I saw that.
Yeah.
Most of the people thought I was pregnant, right?
Everybody.
And I got phone calls and
Oh my God.
about it.
Gosh.
And like, I hope you're not. And
Excuse me?
like, don't yes, and like, don't speak that into existence. And this is family, and I'm like,
I wish a girl would. I would hang
hold
up
on,
on them
like,
so quick.
I'm 35.
Look,
If
now that I have
kids-
2 kids and I'm we're raising them successfully as 2 blind adults, can't nobody tell me shit
and I'm not
about
sure.
having another kid.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's because financially we may not be like where I want us to be or where we want to be.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is our kids don't go without anything.
But let's be honest. I mean, how many people are truly financially ready to have any kid?
Right.
Yeah.
Even these days, how our economy is so fucked up, nobody is financially in the place, honestly, probably the majority of us to have multiple kids.
Yeah.
But it's like, let me be that deciding factor. But I will say, if I were to be pregnant, it does give me anxiety because of what other people would say.
Yeah. I mean,
It
I've never had
shouldn't,
a pregnancy where everybody's been happy
Me
about
either.
it. And that weighs on you. That's hard to know that like you're going to announce a pregnancy and people are really going to be disappointed or they're going to be upset or they're going to have things to say. Y'all, don't do that. Don't do
it.
Don't
really
be
doesn't
that
feel
person.
well. Because like my first pregnancy was amazing, and it was all I could dream of. But the second one was horrible, and it wasn't because I was sick or anything. It was just people's perceptions and people's like I can't tell you how many people told me not to have a second kid, and it's just like people have the audacity to tell you what to do with your uterus.
My first child, I was told, oh, I wish you really would have gotten an abortion. Ooh. And you know what? Like, I support everybody's right to do whatever they want to do or feel like they need to do. But that was not my decision. And it was hard to hear people say that they wish I would not have continued with that pregnancy. Yeah. And even if that is your thought, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, keep it to yourself. Your mom told you if you don't have nothing nice to say, don't say anything.
Don't say anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, stress is not good for mom or baby, so keep that away. Yeah, you know, and like just be that supportive person that like a lot of people don't have. There's not a lot of negativity as it is, so like just have that support for people, even though you might have other thoughts or opinions. Like just don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So can we talk about quality of life? I know we've been throwing that around in these last 2 episodes, but let's really talk about our quality of life. You know, like, do y'all think that, I mean, obviously, I think all of us would agree that we think we would have drastically different lives if we could see. We would be different people. Do you agree?
I think I would be a different person, but I don't think my life would be that different. Honestly, I think I'd still be doing the exact same thing that I'm doing now.
Oh, I think it would be so different for me.
Mine would be so different. I think a lot of what my life, I mean, I'm in blind sports that take up a lot of my time, and I met my husband because I'm blind. I was gonna say, you know, my best friends because I'm doing this podcast because I'm blind.
That is true.
Because I'm blind. Like, I think I would be a completely different person.
I definitely wouldn't be. I wouldn't have Zayn and Zanaya with Axel.
Yeah.
That's probably true.
I wouldn't have met him.
It's the same for me. I mean, I wouldn't have met Martin, wouldn't have my 2 lovely kids. You know, I wouldn't be in Colorado, probably. I'd still be in California.
Yeah, I'll be in Georgia for sure.
There's so many things I think that are different because I am blind. And I think I would be super vain, honestly.
Me too. I know it.
Yeah.
Look, I'm already vain when I'm blind. Like, God knew I would be unstoppable, insufferable if I could see. Yeah. I'd be like an Instagram model. I just worried about all the wrong fucking things. You know,
that's what I feel like. If I had titties, that's how I would be.
Well, I told Axel yesterday. I was like, I think that having kids definitely slowed him down, but also like,
oh yeah, we've known him before he had kids.
Oh yeah, it's definitely slowed him down. But it also, it's like if he wasn't, and just being blind in general, we wouldn't have met each other, and like it would have been interesting how to see how it would have played out. But 100% different.
You know, that's so interesting too, because it makes me think that I'm the only one who had a different opinion, but I also lost my vision a lot later in life than you all did. And like, I met my husband in school, not related to like the blindness community at all. So that's just, it's just interesting how, I guess too, when you lose your vision makes a difference as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too.
I also think though that like, so I do have some vision, and I was supposed to not have any at all. So like I was supposed to be totally blind by like age 13. And I think that plays a little bit of part in how I am today, because just hearing that I was supposed to lose my sight and like preparing myself for not to have any, it was depressing and it really like hindered me. And so I just wonder like if that really did happen, I would probably still be at home because I wouldn't have like that ambition to like want to do things. And I would have, no offense, people, but I would have been like those people who are at home who are just at home because they're afraid to go outside and afraid to do things.
I can't even imagine that for you.
Yeah.
You don't like to be idle.
I don't.
Yeah. I think that's
That
a
would've been
really
me.
important point. I think that it's a blessing in disguise, and it truly has like empowered so many of us to like be go-getters and like work hard for what we want and not just settle for what we are expected to have, because you know, especially being from a different culture, like they have these expectations for you, especially with someone who has a disability. They don't expect a whole lot from you. They expect you to be a bum at home and not working hard for anything and just being taken care of by others. And so I really think that while, if we're being honest, like being blind can suck sometimes, like it truly has been a blessing for all of us in different ways.
I think so.
Agreed.
That's a great way to say that.
I think that's a really good place to end. I think this has been just such a great episode too. And I hope that everybody's enjoyed hearing all of our different perspectives and stories about how we became mothers and our thoughts and feelings. So thank y'all so much for listening.
Yes, and I hope that people resonated with a lot of our different perspectives too. I know it was kind of a heavier episode, but it's something that I think everybody that is visually impaired and has thought about having kids before has had many of these thoughts. So it was important for us to talk about it.
And feel free to share, like if you're comfortable, email us at babiesdownpodcast@gmail and just share your opinion and how you felt.
We got so many comments, you guys. It was just too many to just even like try to summarize. It was just amazing to see like how everybody felt on the topic, and everyone was so passionate and so vulnerable and ready to share. I think it's something that we don't get a space to talk about enough. So I'm glad that we did.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
And check in the show notes for our socials. And again, please rate us only 5 stars and tell us what you like about the podcast. If you have any constructive criticism, I will say you can email it. Okay. Just like don't say it too loud.
And don't put it in all caps. No,
don't holler at us. I'm sensitive. And we look forward to talking to y'all next week, and have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.